You ask and you shall receive. A lot of you guys wanted to get some in-depth details on the case studies of the over 40 different people that we've currently helped hit million-dollar months. And in this video, that's no different. We're gonna be talking about one of my favorite case studies, turning $300,000 a month into $2.5 million a month. Took about 8 months to get there. At first, it was an incredible deal about what to do, and eventually it unfortunately devolved into what not to do. So during the first half of this, I'll explain the funnels, the advertising strategies, some offer details about what got us there in the first place. I was never able to crack $3 million a month on this deal. That was a big letdown for me on this account. And then, as I mentioned, in a very anticlimactic way, it just devolves to the point where it eventually collapses all the way down to like 500K, 600K a month. All the key players quit. So it's a hell of a story. And we're gonna go through all the details here. Of course, per usual, we won't mention any client names or anything like that. That way you guys can get more information about it and actually learn. So anyway, without further ado, welcome into the video. My name's Jeremy Haynes. If you're new here, all we talk about on this channel is hitting million-dollar months. We don't like to do it one time, we like to do it many times over. There is in no way, shape, or form income claims in this video implying that you are ever gonna hit $1 million a month. The statistical probability to even get to $10 million a year, which is just shy of $1 million a month, is 0.1% according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. So again, no implied claims here. We're just simply reflecting on the lessons of these different deals together, and maybe you pull something away from it that can help your business improve. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back. It's always a pleasure to have you. Let's dive in. So, I get this account back. It was 2019, 2018 timeframe, and I did one of my classic video pitches to this specific client. I actually printed off a photo of the guy and held it up and like did my video pitch that way to get his attention. And this was before AI and all this other crazy shit was going on today. So, you know, it was a custom video and you could tell that right away. This guy in particular at the time was doing about 300K a month. He was in the info space and he was inside of a vertical that I love. If you guys have watched this channel before in any of my videos, you guys know that I'm a fan of massive niches where the customers, especially in-market customers at that, already have opinions and beliefs and ideas about what it is that you're gonna sell them. It becomes far easier to sell people when the niche is massive and there's already a large quantity of people that have thoughts about what it is that you're selling. Makes it far easier. Some examples of this, just to be clear: stocks, real estate, sales. These are all common industries and niches that come to me off the top of my head that I would use as examples for that. Okay, they're huge, massive, large quantities of people on earth participate inside of those industries and niches. And as a result of that, there's a large quantity of in-market demographics, an even larger quantity of the needs-convinced demographics. It's just awesome participating in those because there is so much scale potential. So anyway, we pitch a client inside of one of those three spaces, and we land them. Initially, it was a consulting deal. It was a very simple consulting deal at that. They already had an in-house advertiser at the time, and we were initially instructed to just come in and help the guy out, teach him some advertising strategies and lessons, and try to make the business some more money. Well, we ended up getting the business from 300K a month to 600K a month within about 2 weeks. We came in and there was all kinds of shit that can immediately be done to make a whole lot more money. Just pretty basic best practices that we religiously follow. And again, they had immediate impact. So much impact that the client calls me up and says, hey, we're gonna have you work alongside of this advertiser now. And like, we'd rather you do a transition deal. And this is one of my favorite things a client ever told me. He goes,
how much is your highest client paying you right now?
And at the time I was doing this transition into rev share relationships. My goal and my outcome was to get 100K a month per deal. So I share that with the client. I also was pretty transparent about relatively what other people were paying us. We do a fee plus a rev share in a marketing agency model that we run when we do hands-on deals. So we articulate our pricing model to the guy and he goes, instead of paying us 10K and a 10% net rev share, he goes, I'm gonna pay you 25K a month and the 10% net rev share on this deal. I want you to pay the most attention to me, okay? I want you to prioritize me and our relationship together, okay? If you agree to that, I'll agree to those deal terms. And I was like, hell fucking yeah, dude, I'm about the action. So we get into this deal, we transition within 2 weeks from consulting to a hands-on relationship, and we start the process of getting in the trenches. And boy, was this so fun. Let me explain how this advertising strategy worked, because it was one of the simplest approaches that I've ever seen. And sometimes on this channel, I openly disclose disclose to you guys, like there's two different ways to really scale up. There's the chunk method, and then there's just this go all in on one funnel method. And a lot of the times, especially nowadays, you're seeing the chunk method generally is what gets people to $1 million months. An example of that would be like they have a webinar and a call funnel and DM strategies and maybe like 2 versions of offers that they market those same strategies through. Or maybe they do like low ticket to high ticket or lead form strategies, whatever. They just have like a mix of a bunch of shit. And generally one of those things is dominant, but again, all the other things contribute and chip away at the revenue too. In this specific deal, this was the go all in on one specific strategy, okay? So here we go. For starters, we had some direct response ads, and those direct response ads were all optimized towards a free book, okay? So this was kind of crazy. Every single one of these ads was essentially saying like, get my book. And the book was free. It was completely digital. So there was no like, free plus shipping model of it to help liquidate some of that ad spend. This was just essentially like an opt-in funnel. And this specific page that we drove that traffic to would get leads for really cheap, anywhere from about $2 to $7, give or take the market. From here, and this is actually what made it really interesting, we had 2 things occur. Okay, and those 2 different things were an email sequence and then some retargeting ads. The email sequence was about it was a 12-day email sequence. And for the remarketing ads that we ran, both of these had the same outcome. And both of those outcomes were to ideally get people to go to a webinar, okay? And that webinar was not live. We at some points would do it live, but the parts where we made the most money and sustained over $2 million a month for almost, I want to say it was just shy of 2 years that we sustained over $2 million a month. We had an automated webinar, and we did the thing where like we make it look live. And this whole process, okay, from the direct response ads pushing to the book then had 2 different outcomes, okay? Again, retargeting ads telling people to go to the webinar, and we would only, as retargeting would imply, market to go to the webinar to the people that would get the free book. And the 12-day email sequence, this was like the craziest part of this whole thing, okay? 70% of the revenue from this deal came from this fucking 12-day email sequence. And the craziest part was between days 10 and 12, that was where the money was printing, because that specifically was the time frame between days 10 and 12 that we would start funneling people to the webinar. The other 30% of the revenue came from the remarketing ads telling people to go to the webinar. It's very important to note, and this is a non-exaggeration, literally 100% of the revenue came from the webinar, okay? Just the breakdown of where it technically originated from. Again, that's where that 70-30 split comes from. And then even more of a technicality for you, just to pepper it in, everything technically originated from 2 different places, paid advertising and organic. 95+% of which was from paid, 5% of which was organic. There wasn't a huge organic presence at the time when we first got into the deal. However, through time, that ratio changed. That 95% of paid advertising went down to probably in the 60s, maybe even lower than that, into the 50s. This guy became huge, massive. And I'll talk about that here in a bit. But let me first just explain this flow so you understand it. Okay, this demographic, this was not selling to rich people. This was selling to the general public. So if you've watched any of my videos on my channel, I have one in particular where I go through webinars and just some of the modern webinar best practices that are working. Because if you take this, like what I'm talking about right now, and you didn't adapt it successfully to what's currently working today for webinars, you're gonna have a bad time. So anyway, I have a whole video on my channel dedicated just to webinars, both selling to the general public and affluent audiences. I'd encourage you to go watch that after you check this video out. But this specific webinar, this one was to the general public. Okay, and boy, did we know how to sell to the general public. This was a 2.5K offer. Okay, so 2,500 USD, and we had a payment plan as well. I don't remember what the payment plan was. I remember that it was 3 payments, and I know it came out to a little bit more than $2,500, but this was several years ago at this point. I'm not gonna make it up for you guys. I like to be as honest as I can possibly be. So anyway, we did have a payment plan, and again, I don't recall off the top of my head what the ratio was between the transactions that were PIFs versus the transactions that were payment plans. All I know is that a majority by far, I think it was in the 80s, but again, don't quote me on that, could have been different, we're piffing, okay? And then we had a minority that were doing payment plan. Now, here's the craziest part. We would essentially front cash for about 2 weeks. Because like I said, a majority of the revenue, 70% of it, came from that email sequence, okay? Between days 10 and 12. And then again, 30% of it would come from the webinar remarketing ad. But again, all of it would come from this webinar that we would attribute it to. So we ran this thing up, and this is one of the craziest things. okay? It got scary, I will say that. It did get scary. I don't necessarily recommend doing this, okay? But it did work really well. And I do recommend one piece of this, which is gassing the fuck out of what's currently working. That is an absolute best practice that I will hand down to you and make sure you understand. When you get ROI positive, you simply have to press the gas. Most of you are pussy when it comes to scaling, and that's why you haven't scaled. You have something that's gotten profitable, but you haven't actually just pressed the gas and scaled the fuck out of it. After it's gotten profitable, you'll experience like ROAS fluctuations, and that'll force you to pull your spend back instead of just realizing like ROAS isn't a static number, okay? ROAS is a dynamic number that will fluctuate a little bit as you continue to climb the ladder of scale. So yeah, you might be at like a 10-to-1 ROAS and all of a sudden you're at a 3-to-1 and then you work your way back up to like a 7-to-1, but you still scale the entire time and make more money as you continue to grow the business. That's what we did here. That was the one thing that I noticed when I first came in that created that $300,000 difference in 2 weeks when I was in my consulting role in this case. I just noticed they were already profitable and that the current advertiser wasn't gassing it, okay? So we started implementing a bunch of tactics to just press this thing up, okay? So anyway, when I come in and I officially take over the account, I'm not doing too much different. It's important to note, like due to the model here, we were able to immediately advertise to cold audiences. But because of the size of the niche that we were in, there was such a big in-market demographic, whether they were cold or not. There were a bunch of people that needed this, okay? Now, I can't give too many details away about it because, again, you'll likely be able to know who it is in the instance that I give too many details, and I don't want that to be the case. That way I can ensure I can give you like as much, detailed information on this case study as I can. I will say this, okay? At this particular time, a big thing that currently most salespeople lean towards doing nowadays was not common back then, okay? And this specific guy came in and aggressively taught about that strategy and how to go about doing sales a little differently in comparison to how people historically had done it, okay? And it was extremely well received, and he taught it extremely well, and he would get people such phenomenal results, and that's why this thing was able to just perpetuate. It was just a perpetual money machine, okay? And I was able to test it with cold audiences, warm audiences, and as time went on, like I said, the guy had a real organic presence that started to grow, and that was both because we were spending a fuckload of money and because the organic stuff through time just picks up. So anyway, we're testing a ton of different audiences. We get to the point, all right, where we're cracking like $2.5 million months, it would flux a little bit, to be fair. It would go like maybe 2.1 to 2.5, give or take the particular months. Most months would be around 2.5 once we got there. We didn't really go up or go down after that time frame. And that was what was kind of crazy. So anyway, this client started to deeply believe that an info product only has life for maybe a year or so. And I completely disagreed with that. And I had so much data to present, not just like random data from out in the wild, like literal data from client accounts that demonstrated that was so untrue. But unfortunately, this belief, like beliefs cause wars, okay? Beliefs drive almost all human behavior. And this specific client, they were so attached to that singular belief. And, obviously that led the client to create some other product, which unfortunately led to some diversified attention, which I do believe in part kind of limited the revenue of the business. If we would have kept all of our attention collectively on the main offer that was working really well, and honestly, just ideated some other funnel variation, I think we would have had a really good time. Instead, one of the issues that kind of presented itself was we just collectively didn't necessarily prioritize like, all right, let's try to do like low ticket to high ticket. Let's try to just market the webinar on the front end. Let's do call funnels. Let's do like, there's all kinds of ideas that we could have executed on simply that we just did it, and it wasn't because the ideas weren't being presented. It was because the ideas just were not getting taken action on. Nobody was actually doing anything with the ideas when they were being presented, so they just ultimately died. We had in this particular team 12 very, very great people a part of the staff. I would consider every single one of them an A player. These are the kind of staff that you just get to brag about, like you get to talk about the fact you got to work with people like this. It's one of those things that like, as somebody who loves work and loves making money and like just likes to contribute to the world through that, these are the kind of people that like you look back in hindsight on and you're like, man, that was a special operation right there. That was a special unit of people, and I was very grateful for the opportunity to be able to work in such a team. And amongst those types of people, everybody was an A player. Everybody had so many responsibilities. Due to the fact everybody was an A player, you didn't have to have a large team even at that level of revenue. Everybody was doing so well at what they were responsible for doing, as I mentioned. So this belief of, okay, we need to come out with something new. We need to have another course. We need to have another info product. This is where I think things started to kind of devolve a little bit. And unfortunately, the deal transitioned from like, let's grow this thing just by iterating on other funnels for this offer to let's try to replicate this, but with a different offer instead. The second offer that comes out just shits the bed, dude. It was terrible. Not well received at all. So few people bought it, and it just didn't make sense. It didn't align at all to what the personal brand was like talking about and what they were known for. It was essentially just so random, of what the product was. It just didn't make any sense to come out with. But we probably rode that thing out for a couple months, and thankfully this main offer was still absolutely printing money. It just never stopped. It just continuously 2 million, 2.5 million every single month. We didn't lower the ad dollars on this. This got to the point where we were spending upwards of like $700,000 a month on ads because we had to transition from in-market to needs convinced. At one point at the very end when we were spending that amount of money, we even got to the point where we were in mass market, which I developed entire strategies for, like my harvester strategy. Today, I would definitely use my tornado ad strategy and strategies like my hammer them campaigns for this type of account, where I talk about those things in depth in programs like my Inner Circle offer. I also talk about them in depth in my Master Internet Marketing offer. The Inner Circle is for rich people trying to get a hell of a lot richer. If you're already at least 100K a month, we have guys that come in there that are already at $1 million a month. You're trying to get a lot richer if you come into the Inner Circle program, to be clear. Again, there's no income claim associated with it, but as a person, as a business, your goal is obviously excessive growth if you come into that type of offer, especially given the pricing of it. It's not expensive, but it is costly. You will pay enough to pay the right amount of attention to it. We work with busy rich people for a living. We make it extremely efficient to be able to consume all of the necessary information, make it actionable, so you can turn around and get results with it inside of all our programs, to be clear, but especially in that Inner Circle offer. We do twice a month one-on-one calls. You can book them. You don't have to. Up to you. 30 minutes each. Direct, punctual, to the point. You and I are going to be able to get on those calls and just talk money immediately, okay? We also do weekly group calls inside of that program. We typically cover about an hour, sometimes up to 2 hours on a weekly basis, Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. They're obviously all recorded. We have a giant library full of them. We have our masterminds. We actually got one coming up here pretty soon. We do them every quarter. We do those here in person in Miami, Florida, and those are all recorded as well. You're always welcome to go consume all of the historical ones, and if you can't make it in person, that's why we do 4 times a year. We also stream them live for those that want to tap in remote. In addition to all of that, we have a really active group on Telegram where we have all the rich people that are trying to get a hell of a lot richer all in one place. Extremely active community. Everybody's sharing insights on what's working, asking questions. You'll be surprised. We don't need you to pay us to then come in and teach, but you'll have a natural inclination to come in and want to share because you'll get so much value from everybody else. It's kind of like a real give and take situation there. Again, that offer is absolutely stacked, and we also include AI Jeremy in it now. You could do unlimited Zoom calls, voice calls. You also have the ability to have unlimited messages with it, and it's trained on a decade of my career of documented material. It's incredible. We also have, again, the Master Internet Marketing Group, which is 7 weeks of classes. Each class is about 3 to 4 hours in length. Some of them are even 5 hours long. There's dozens of homework library videos in between. We also give you AI Jeremy in there. You do not get unlimited voice and video minutes. You do pay an extremely low cost. It's like literally pennies to get per minute voice and video access inside of the Master Internet Marketing Group. And that's because it's a one-time price. The Inner Circle members pay monthly or annually. Master Internet Marketing, you just pay one time for lifetime access to the product. In addition to all of that, you obviously get access to an incredible community, also extremely active there. Both of the links for those are in the description of this video. I'd encourage that you check them out. Okay, back to my point, okay? Inside of this offer, these people, okay, when we started scaling up aggressively and all of a sudden we're ideating on different offer types, we got really off track with that, okay? It ultimately led to the demise and like the erosion of everybody in this team, this staff of these 12 people, these absolute all-star A players. It started to erode like the morale a little bit when they couldn't get ideas off anymore. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this deal eventually devolved to the point where it became a lesson of what not to do, okay? Everything just eventually collapsed, but it kept sustaining itself. I get to the point where I'm spending $700K a month and I'm doing all these different ad strategies, and we could not get this guy to listen to us anymore. And not only could we not get him to listen, he went out with all this cash he had accumulated and he bought like 40 different businesses. And the businesses were so random. It's not like the businesses even made sense to buy. You might look at it like, hey, there's a diversification logic to that where, you're making all your money in one business and it makes sense to just go and buy a few more. But here's why it did make sense, okay? It's different if you go buy like a ton of real estate to depreciate your taxes. It's different if you go buy like a ton of equities or like even if you just buy interest in businesses. But no, this guy went out and bought the businesses fully and had to take them over and like run the operations. And there got to a point where like he just was really self-convinced that he was the main driver of the business's growth. And I'm in no way, shape, or form trying to sound egotistical when I say this. Like, I'm not sitting here saying like, oh dude, I'm the reason they made all the money. No, it was a large collective effort amongst every single member in this team and obviously the business owner. But no one individually drove all of the result. Again, it was a big collective effort, but the business owner didn't look at it that way. The business owner kind of like devolved to this perspective of thinking like he was the one who drove all of the result. And obviously he looked at himself as kind of like a master of business to a degree. And so when he goes and buys all these other businesses, he then has to employ over 200 staff at once. Like, it was one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed in a business we've worked in. And I've seen some crazy shit over the years, okay? Some things that just make you scratch your head and go, what the fuck are we doing, okay? Actually, me and the guy behind the camera here were actually laughing about that literally earlier today on a deal that's at 1.6 million a month. And, they got to the size where they've just, hired too many people and like there's so many communication cycles open and like there's more communication happening than work. And like when the work does get done, it doesn't get executed in the way it needs to, And these types of deals, you gotta like shatter, like instantaneously shatter these like kind of bureaucratic, almost political situations that start to develop. And you've got to cut through the noise and just get back to actually doing the work, okay? That's what can happen at like these larger levels in business, okay? Now this deal was no different, but technically it was a lot worse. Okay, 40 different businesses get bought, 200 staff get deployed onto these businesses, but they're also like all working on this info business somehow. So all the 12 key players that have never needed any kind of support staff before and do everything incredibly well now have insane levels of complexity to their life. And the worst part was, and I don't say this disrespectfully to like these other people, but it was a matter of fact, these other 200 people that the guy hired were so bad, like they were B and C players. They were not A players, they were B and C players. They were just subpar, like, looking for a paycheck, kind of sitting back. They didn't like to be judged based on result. They didn't like to be pushed. They didn't like to be held accountable. And that creates an extremely political environment inside of a company, okay? Because what happens is your A players who solely judge themselves based on results and momentum and speed, they all of a sudden have to clash with people who are attempting actively to go as slow as they can. And whether intentional or not, like they're just way more casual people who don't judge themselves on outcomes. And they value like work-life balance and like all the other things. And dude, they end up having an HR department that gets developed and like instantaneously, dude, there's like so many, like dozens and dozens and dozens of complaints that just start rolling in of all these A players against like all these B and C players. It's like the Navy SEALs going against like a platoon of hundreds of soldiers, They're just trained completely differently. They operate completely differently. And if and when they have to work together, there's just completely different expectations of how they operate and how they behave. So that creates a clash, you know what I mean? So anyway, one by one, dude, one by one, it was like the saddest thing. One by one, some of these 12 players just start to quit. Okay, and even worse, the 200 B and C players start to get thrown into these different positions, and it's never exaggerated when people try to tell you this. Okay, an A player can do the job of like 4 to 5 different B or C players. So when one of the 12 people would quit, it's like 4 or 5 different people would go and have to like fill this department that was previously handled by one A player, and it caused even more friction in that team that was responsible for this business that we've been talking about, and it just starts to become hellish. Because every time one of those A players would leave, there'd just be a fleet of B and C players, these turds that would get thrown in the mix of like your operations that, historically have been so efficient and so lean and like so fast. And again, you're just exposed even more to like all that stuff that you hate as an A player. So, okay, along the way, while that's happening, okay, remember that second offer I talked about that was introduced that just flopped? Obviously, you can't stop there when you believe your first offer is gonna die, even though it's still printing 2 to 2.5 million a month and supplementing this entire thing you've got going on. So they bring out a third offer, okay? The third offer didn't completely shit the bed. The third offer like started off slow. It got to the point, to be fair, where it did like all right. It had legs, it had legs, and it wasn't doing nearly as much as the first offer. But again, it wasn't like awful, okay? It officially was a contributor. But at this point, it's like it could not be maximized to the degree that it needed to and pushed because of the bureaucracy. Okay, and I am not exaggerating when I say this. This deal became like, it went from like driving a fucking NASCAR, or for all the European people watching this or people all over the world watching this, be like driving an F1 car and then getting in like a super shitty like 1980s, piece of shit hoopty car. You know what I mean? It just, the speed differences and like how everything all of a sudden was just dramatically different. The mechanics of the whole thing just changed. And dude, these people, like they, I'll give you a perfect example, right? I remember one time a guy, I just thought it was so dumb what he chose to do. And I just called it out. I was just like, hey, like, I think that makes no sense. That's gonna slow everything down. I don't think that we should do it that way. I think that we should try this instead. I get pulled into HR later and told that I'm an asshole and being egotistical for like holding a guy accountable to getting things done the way that I thought they should get done, And I was like, all right, like maybe I'm wrong. So I try to start to reform and like, integrate into this thing that is fucking happening in front of me. And dude, again, like this entire time, each one of those 12 people, like at this point in the story, we're probably down to like 6 of the original 12, and then 5, and then 4, and then it's down to like the 3 or 4 of us that like honestly like gave it a solid shot to try to integrate into this whole thing, thinking maybe we're the ones that were wrong, and maybe we didn't know what we were doing, and maybe this was like the next evolution, and maybe this did make sense to do and we just didn't know it, and maybe all this friction and like really apparent signs and evidence that things were fucked up and going wrong, maybe we were wrong, and maybe we were just interpreting it wrong. And oh man, dude, I mean, we were not wrong at all. We were the farthest thing from wrong. This deal starts to get to the point where, obviously the revenue starts to go down a bit, okay? And things go so slow. I just want to take a moment and pause real quick. For a little traumatizing. Okay, few key lessons here. Number one, there have been many instances where I've seen businesses, it typically happens when you get to a couple $1 million a month. Sometimes you could start to see it develop when you get to $1 million a month. I talk about this very key lesson generally more from like a personal development perspective, but it happens too at these levels. Everybody just kind of has these like dormant personalities and people within them that come out circumstantially, okay? So as an example, you might have a belief in your head, if you've got no money currently, that rich people are all assholes. And if you coincidentally ever get rich one day, you'll all of a sudden just be an asshole, and you'll not be really self-aware about it because you had this like subconscious dormant personality that you've been developing from movies and shows and all these little short form clips that get thrown at you, and conversation and interpretation of different experiences in your own life, and like stories and hearsay and handy down beliefs that all of a sudden like morph a character in your head about how you're supposed to be in what different circumstances and conditions. So when these different conditions and circumstances arise in your life, you pop, bam, you're just a new character all of a sudden. And happens in so many different circumstances. Like you might get fat enough where you're like, I don't see myself this way, like somebody who looks like how I look, they do this. And then all of a sudden you just kick it into high gear and start losing weight rapidly. There's people I've seen, like the exact opposite can be true, where like you drop to a certain body fat percentage and you get fit enough where bam, like all of a sudden you behave a different way, or like all of a sudden you're extremely confident and more certain and more capable, like there's just so many different examples I can provide. But in this specific example, this guy accumulated enough cash in his bank account, and in addition to that was at a certain amount of cash flow for a sustained duration of time, that type of situation happened here. And I've seen that happen so many times over. And if you're not self-aware of it and very intentional about what type of character you need to be next, this can really damage your business and ruin things for you and lose a ton of money for you, more importantly than anything else. You gotta really be careful about the beliefs that you have about who different people are at different levels, because all of a sudden when you coincidentally find yourself there and you're not self-aware that you're there, you just, bam, you're that new character. So this guy in particular, like this was probably one of the craziest like up close examples of that. And it's also a great example of what happens when you try to get A players to mix in with B and C players and like try to force your A players into like a new culture. It just didn't make any sense, and they all quit. Literally every single one of them quit. I was one of the last 3 standing in that deal, and I didn't quit. I'd actually gotten pushed out of the deal. I devolved to the point in my role where I was no longer the advertiser. They got tired of paying me as much as they did, and I transitioned to being a consultant in the deal and trained my replacement, and then eventually was pushed out of the account completely. It was crazy. And again, this is really important to understand. I still have a great relationship with this guy, but I think the craziest thing about this whole deal is this guy today, I mean, give or take the month, like maybe 400 to like 600K a month in revenue now. And there were like so many ways to prevent that from happening and to sustain the level of revenue that the deal was at. This guy doesn't even identify that like his money originated from this. This guy actually identifies as a tech entrepreneur now. And that's where he like says all of his money came from, which is really weird too. I don't know, man. It was just a fucking crazy deal. There's a lot of lessons about like the mental side of scaling a business up and how important it is to maintain like self-awareness and identity lessons and like A-player lessons and like offer lessons. And rather than like just iterating brand new offers when you're stuck, just iterating funnels and changing conversion mechanisms and like trying new ad strategies and, a better use of resources, and diversification. Like there were just so many lessons. And I talk a lot about these things at length inside of my Inner Circle offer. I'd really encourage you to check out the link in the description if you haven't done so already. I, again, at length talk about this specific case study because it's such a great set of principles on what to do and what not to do. So anyway, just to get back to some of the things that I also think worked tremendously well. This was actually really crazy. So as I mentioned, we were spending about $700,000 a month, okay, on ad spend alone. And one of the coolest things that happened as a result of that, as an agency, there's 3 levels of reps that you can get access to in your agency or your business in life when you're operating on Facebook specifically, which is where all of that 700K was going out of. Number 1, you have the regular, super shitty in most instances. Shout out to the few of you that might actually be good watching this, because there is a handful of you. Those marketing reps that rotate between like 90 and 120 clients a quarter, they're generally really bad. Like they generally have the worst advice and don't have a lot of access and like just, they can't get you cool beta features or alpha features that are out. They don't really have like great support escalation that they can do or help you with. Those are the standard marketing reps. A level above that is really good. It's called an industry ad expert. To my understanding, this specific rep, the way he articulated himself to us, he had about 10 to 12 clients max that he was allowed to work with at the time. They all had to be spending at least $1 million a month in his vertical that he was assigned to. And above that was called a global ad partner. That was for the big corporations like Pepsi, Amex, like companies like that. Anyway, we got an industry ad expert assigned to us because as an agency, when you accumulated all of our spend that we had into an amount, you have to spend more than $1 million a month for 6 months in a row. So we had officially crossed that threshold inside of our agency accounts and like all the businesses we had access to. So we got assigned this industry ad expert for the info niche specifically. And this guy, we go out to Menlo Park, which is Facebook's main headquarters out there south of San Francisco. We land, we take a helicopter with blade straight down from Oakland into the Menlo Park, like Silicon Valley area. We go over to Facebook's headquarters. First of all, total side note, Facebook's headquarters is fucking sweet. If you ever get the opportunity to go and like actually be there, it's so cool, dude. It's designed by Walt Disney's theme park designers. It's a literal campus. It has great walking trails. Fun fact, they have that little like fox logo if you ever see it here and there, because there's like lots of foxes that are on their property. It's actually really crazy. The security is extreme. Like obviously you're not gonna go there and just walk around without a very specific pass that you walk around and wear on your neck or your waist or something like that. We go to Facebook's headquarters, we sit down for a fucking incredible lunch. They have all these free restaurants. We had barbecue that day in particular. They have a full arcade too, by the way. If you guys ever go or you've ever been, tell me how fucking sweet that arcade is, dude. It's so fun. So anyway, we go to this room, little conference room with a whiteboard, and our rep at the time, he sits us down and he tells us all the things that we could do to improve. Okay? And one of the main things that he told us, because keep in mind, this campaign type that we were running, the main thing that we were actually optimizing around was purchases inside of the webinar itself. And we would just have a delayed data attribution model for about 2-ish weeks. And that was working really well for us. But he gave us this concept, which I teach inside of my Master Internet Marketing program. I also teach it in my Inner Circle offer at length, called cyclic campaigns. And he essentially said, look, you guys are optimizing for the furthest down the thing funnel. You could strategically optimize around the things that are just levels above that for standard events, and you can get an exceptionally better result, and that in itself could be a great scaling strategy for you. And he explains the whole concept of it. And dude, he not only told us that, he told us one of the craziest statistics I've ever heard about a client. Okay, so out of this 700K a month, I was ripping about 200K of that on content. Okay? Now, a lot of advertisers who have no idea what the fuck they're doing like to rip on content and act like it doesn't make a difference because it's not a direct response objective. You know, some people will hear that and they'll think, $200,000 a month on content, are you fucking dumb? And I think the opposite. I think it's actually super silly you guys don't justify a higher content distribution budget, especially when you're at scale. Keep in mind, this account wasn't one of those little fucking small fry accounts that most of the advertisers who bitch at me about this work on. This was a mass market account. I was turning nurses and like Uber drivers and like people who were going to college who would drop out to become this that we were teaching people about, okay? This was serious like mass market content distribution that was actively selling people and handing beliefs to people to think with and to inherit as their own to become a higher probability customer for us to convert and help improve their life, okay? And content does a huge part of that when it comes to the heavy lifting. Content is also extremely fucking cheap to distribute. And we're talking like 2019, 2020 timeframe now in terms of where we're at in the deal with this level of spend, okay? More likely 2020, by the way, in terms of time frame. We get to the point where this guy, our industry ad expert, tells us out of the total quantity of impressions available on the platform for personal development, okay? Any singular personal development piece of content that existed that could target somebody, we were 1/3 of every possible impression that was being served to people, okay? And just to quantify that for you so you understand it a little better, on a month by month basis, we would either be just shy or just over 100 million impressions. We took this guy to a literal household name with about 200K a month in content. It fed the organic like no other. I can't tell you the exact amount of subscribers the guy has on YouTube because again, I'm trying not to like give enough data for you guys to go out there and fucking fish information and figure out who it is so I can, make a video like this for you guys. But I'll tell you what, dude, we took this guy to a couple million subscribers, a couple million followers here, a couple million followers there, just splashing a couple million followers on every channel. It's so hard to comprehend, okay? The scale that we were operating at with the quantity of people reached within a 30-day cycle, within a quarterly cycle, okay? And we weren't just targeting singular countries. Obviously, to reach that level of impressions and volume, we were targeting all of the top first world countries that we could and converting customers internationally. This was a crazy operation. And I'll give you a perfect example. I remember we were in Texas, okay? And I won't tell you the ethnicity of this dude because it'll give it away straight away, but he doesn't look like he's from Texas, okay? And we're there for an event with Keith Cunningham. Keith Cunningham, one of my favorite books for business people, The Road Less Stupid. And we're there for an event called Keys to the Vault. And we had a hotel literally right next door to the hotel that we were going to. It was not even one block of a walk. It was a literal half a block. Like it'd be like the hotel was here and the other hotel was across the street on the other corner. Just trying to leave the hotel in Texas, where this guy's not from, not even remotely close, looks like he's from here. We had 3 people in the hotel stop us. We had 2 people in the street stop us. When we got to the other hotel, we had 1 person stop us. This was insane. Like, again, the level of awareness that just the general public had for this guy. And I remember in particular, there was, all those people who just think courses are a fucking scam. There's whole channels dedicated and pages dedicated to just essentially course haters. And we've talked at length, by the way, on a video dedicated to propaganda, where no matter where you're at, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you're talking about, there's always gonna be a percentage of people who are super sold, just like I am. Like, I deeply believe that courses and books and mentorship and education, and I know it sounds biased because I have an education company myself, and I'm not trying to give biased advice. I'm trying to articulate my position on where I stand to help you understand this lesson I'm trying to hand down. I am in the bucket of people who are super fucking sold on how helpful like books, events, courses, mentors, like that kind of stuff is, paying for advice, okay? However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, there exists an equally big or sometimes smaller or sometimes bigger group of people that just absolutely fucking hate courses and books and mentors. And they think that it's a literal scam, no matter what, no matter how helpful it is, no matter how many people they've helped, no matter what the results are, they don't care. Just as I technically don't care. Like, yeah, there's actual scammers and there's actual people who like are legitimately out to fuck you when they create a course, okay? And I'm not talking about those people when I'm talking about how convicted I am of how helpful those kind of things can be. Those people are obviously fucking dog shit people and shouldn't exist. Those are unethical people. But that's the thing that the people who think courses and stuff like that are a scam, that's all they think. That's how they think people like me are, you know? They think,
oh, dude, you sell a course like you're an OnlyFans girl but a guy, you know? It's like, you get what I mean? So anyway.
that demographic of people at this scale, right? And then there's this group of people in the middle. The group of people in the middle are like very persuadable, very open to having one belief or the other. These are like the swing voters. These are the people that you can target and convert into one side or the other. Now, I just want you to remember the statistic of 100 million people, okay? Out of that 100 million people that actively are aware of this, there's a great website. It's a crowd visualization website. And when you look this up, crowd visualizer, one of the biggest crowds that they visualize is in the Michigan University, Michigan Wolverines. They show this image here where it's 100,000 people. Now, just to put it in perspective, right? If you look at this as an example, this is 180,000 people at the Texas Motor Speedway. This one, for some reason, just hits harder, and it's also a relatively even number. Let's just take that number real quick and try to demonstrate for you so you understand how truly crazy this number is, okay? So if we take 100 million, okay? 100 million, and we just divide it by 100,000. That way we can try to get like a general understanding of how many stadiums full of people this is that we're aware of this guy every month. That's 1,000 packed full, every single fucking seat filled stadium of people that are, just imagine like in the center of this stadium 1,000 times over, that there are people just watching your piece of content or watching your video or watching your ad or just aware of who you are, okay? The scale is insane to comprehend. Even me putting it this way with a visual, you're still not really getting it, okay? Notice how you're trying, but like, you think you might try to convince yourself you get it, but it's hard to get because it's incomprehensible. We've never seen anything like that. It's hard to visualize. So anyway, now, out of those 1,000 stadiums, full of 100,000 people, let's just put it like this. How would you feel or how would you behave or how would you react if you stood in the middle of one stadium full of 100,000 people that fucking hate you and think you are a scammer, think you're a piece of shit, like just, again, they just think you're unethical for doing what you do. They, no matter what you say, keep in mind what I talked about, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, they don't give a fuck. They just by default think you're that way. It's like, okay, that's crazy to consider, but that's only 100,000 people. Okay, out of 100 million impressions, what do you think the percentage was that were in that bucket? What if it was like 5 million people? How loud do you think 5 million people can be that just absolutely fucking hate you? So anyway, I remember at one point, this guy gets a video made about him from, it was actually a past student of his. This guy could have made the simplest video ever to help articulate this level of understanding, okay? So he had a total of 15,000 students, okay? And it might be more, I'm not sure. At the time, it was 15,000. Okay, there were a total, at the end of this whole thing that I'm about to articulate, of roughly 10, okay, that came out in a video and said, hey, like, I didn't like my experience, you know, I spent X amount of thousands of dollars and like, I think I got scammed, okay? Now, this client could have done the easiest thing and just helped people understand like the scale. We had infinite data to support every statistic and metric that I'm sitting here talking to you about. And instead, the guy just like casually let it go and just said, no, I don't think we need to address that, it doesn't matter. So this video ends up getting like 1 million views, okay? Now 1 million views out of 100 million monthly impressions is literally fucking nothing. It's a fart in the wind, doesn't matter at all, okay? But to the average person who has no idea of the scale that this guy's operating at, it looks insane. Because again, 1 million people is a lot of fucking people. And 1 million people is far easier to comprehend than the actual scale that this person was operating at. So anyway, $200,000 a month in content creates a household name, is the main lesson I want to hand down to you. $200,000 a month creates like president levels of awareness, okay? Like it is extreme the level of awareness you create when you spend that amount of money on content distribution. It's insane what you get as an outcome, even if you just spend all $700,000 on direct response ads at that level. Okay? And the content turns into more money. It absolutely does. And it creates a huge remarketing bucket for you to be able to retarget to. And if you use one of my strategies, especially at a scale like that, one of my content marketing strategies that I consistently talk about, you can get a lot of great benefits and outcomes from it. And we were doing that. We were seeing those results. So anyway, we had 10 people that just will essentially just say bad results, okay? And so many things could have been done. Could have just been refund them, make a response video. Like there could have been so many things, okay? Instead, the guy just ignores it. It's like, let me give you a perfect example of this. okay? Let alone the million people divided by the 100 million people, how small that truly is. Just take the 10 angry people and divide it by 15,000 people, okay? That statistic is 0.06% of people that came out and made a video as unhappy. What if the total quantity of unhappy people was 1%? Okay, that still means 99% of people were happy, getting the results that they wanted, having a good experience with the product. But, and this is really important to understand, majority of the people who are gonna buy stuff, they're just gonna remain pretty neutral, whether they get a good result, a bad result, no result, they're just gonna relatively stay quiet. You have a bunch of people that are gonna say great things, and you have a bunch of people that are gonna say bad things. And here's the thing, usually the great people, like you don't go to a review platform and read all the 5-star reviews. Generally you go and look at the 1-star reviews and you try to get an idea of how fucked you could get. And when that kind of stuff is left unaddressed, you know, you just kind of get a demise where you all of a sudden go from 2.5 million and just, you know, just go straight down. When you add it with all that chaos that I articulated with the crazy amount of B and C players that were hired, all the A players quitting, the crazy beliefs that okay, hey, this main thing that's making us 2 million plus a month right now is no longer gonna work. Let's try to diversify, and instead of improving literally anything or trying a different funnel, let's just abandon it completely and do something else. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it was a great deal for a few years, you know? Everybody made a lot of money, we helped a lot of people, and at the very least, learned a ton of lessons. No doubt about that, learned a ton of lessons. So hopefully you don't have to learn these kind of things the hard way. When you're scaling up to whatever level your goals are, or you're trying to hit the big $1 million months and you eventually get there, one of the most brutally honest lessons that is relatively hard to understand, but that's the thing about making a lot of money. You deal with more sophisticated problems and you gotta be prepared to deal with them, is that mental, like, self-identity lesson that I peppered in there in the middle of all of that. Don't neglect that lesson at all. It is profound of how often you can see it. The other main thing that I would encourage out of all of this that you walk away with is the speed in which an organization moves. The beliefs that an organization holds drive the behavior more than a lot of the other stuff. Just stay in action. Don't get caught up thinking communication is progress, okay? Communication is rarely progress. The action is where progress is made. The action and in the trenches is where you want to stay. Do not get caught up thinking that you are making progress by communicating, okay? That's all I got for you. Hope this video was great. Hopefully you don't go through something as traumatizing as what I did in this deal. And I just want to give, you know, this deal some props. I mean, at the end of the day, this is, you know, just something that was new to every single person on this account. Nobody had ever really gone through that kind of situation before. And I do attest to the fact that I do think everybody, you know, even though through all like the chaos of the deal, did a very impressive job trying to hold it together and working with the conditions and variables at hand. And ultimately it was, you know, a really positive impact that this person had on the world. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad I got to participate and I think it was awesome. So anyway, go enjoy some of my other videos, get richer, talk soon.